Hello, everyone. Tonight we are standing at the edge of a forgotten path. The leaves above you twitch in the breeze, and something ancient watches from behind a wall of moss. Your feet crunch down on damp earth, and just ahead, barely visible through the green, there's a staircase that seems to lead upward into nothing. No railings, no roof, just stone steps that dissolve into jungle shadow. The air smells like rain that never quite fell. You're surrounded by trees that grew tall in silence. But underneath, hidden just out of sight, are the bones of temples and cities, places where thousands once lived, loved, schemed, and shouted over who forgot to grind the corn. Places now covered in roots and vines, as though time came with a blanket and tucked everything in. Oh, and by the way, you probably won't survive here, not because of snakes or jaguars, though. Yes, there are those, but because you're about to walk into a civilization that mastered the sky, counted to infinity, and still collapsed hard enough to disappear into the dirt. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. It's kind of fun seeing where and when you're watching from. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You shuffle along a path choked with leaf litter, careful not to trip on the gnarled roots that curl like lazy snakes. The humidity presses against your skin like a warm, wet towel. Somewhere above, a howler monkey lets out a bark that sounds like a demon gargling espresso. But below all of this, below the vines, the bugs and that one beetle that looks way too confident, there's something older than most nations. Stones stacked in patterns, platforms, shaped into terraces. Staircases going nowhere because the rest of the buildings have been eaten by centuries. This isn't just forest. This is the topsoil of a dead kingdom. You crouch down and brush your fingers across the edge of a stone block. It's not natural. It's too smooth, too deliberate. And there, carved into it, is a faint outline of a face. Square jaw, big eyes. Maybe a god. Maybe a king. Or maybe someone's mom who got deified for inventing the tortilla. Historians still debate whether certain glyphs were purely religious or also familial. Honestly, it could have been both. You step further in, at a moss-draped stela, and realize you're walking across what was once a plaza. A real one. Not the kind with a Starbucks and 4 sad pigeons. This was a place of gathering, a stone canvas for ceremony, coronation, and every kind of drama. You try to imagine it, colors everywhere. Feathered headdresses, bouncing incense smoke, curling into the trees. A priest shouting something poetic and probably terrifying. The stone beneath your feet would have been swept smooth by hundreds of sandals, and now you're the first in centuries to scuff it with a rubber sole. Above you, the ceiba tree looms. The Mayans believed it connected the underworld earth and the heavens. They didn't just live among the trees. They built cosmology into the canopy, which is beautiful, and honestly, a little intimidating. You stare up into the green ceiling and wonder how many people looked at it and thought, yes, that's where the gods park their clouds. The first real historical fact hits you as you duck under a vine. The classic Maya cities weren't just scattered villages. By around 750 CE, there were millions of people across this region, living in urban centers, with towering pyramids, observatories, and more written history than most of Europe had at the time. They had complex calendars, an advanced number system. They invented the concept of zero long before Europe caught on, and political systems that would make even the messiest reality TV show blush. Also, just to slide this one in, while you're getting comfy, Maya elites sometimes rubbed crocodile dung on their skin as sunscreen. No joke. The logic thick, sticky, probably bug repellent. The smell. Historically not recorded, but you can guess. You move deeper into the forest. A stone causeway stretches off in both directions, wide enough for 2 carts to pass, if they had wheels, which the Maya didn't use for transport, by the way. Not because they didn't know how to make wheels. They just didn't have draft animals to pull carts, so they stuck to carrying things by hand. You think about that the next time your groceries feel heavy. There's a breeze now threading through the vines. Something whispers in it. Not a ghost. Just history brushing past your ears, like it's trying to be remembered. You sit on a lichen-covered bench. It's cool to the touch and carved with patterns that meant something once. Probably still do, but your modern eyes can't read them. Maybe it's a prayer. Maybe it's just someone doodling after lunch. Far away, a bird shrieks. You're not alone, but the forest isn't hostile. It's patient, which is worse in a way. It didn't kill the Maya. It just waited. Let their cities rise. Let them fall. Then grew back over the bones like moss on a gravestone. And now here you are, breathing in the same air, touching the same stones, listening to echoes that don't quite make sense but still hum somewhere in your chest. It's only the first part of the story, but the canopy has already closed behind you. Word count 1, empty, waiting for continue. The path slopes down now, less a trail, and more a suggestion. You push aside broad leaves that leave a sheen of moisture on your skin. And there finally you see it, a pyramid, or what's left of one. It rises from the ground like a forgotten memory, its side swallowed by roots and moss. Trees grow out of the upper tiers like it's wearing a crown of jungle hair. But you can still trace the shape symmetrical, steep, too steep for casual climbing. Which, let's face it, you were never going to do anyway. You stand at its base, craning your neck up, and realize this wasn't built to be functional. This was built to impress the gods. And probably the neighbors. A classic move. The city around you starts to unfold one stone structure at a time. Not with fanfare, but with eerie calm. There are hints of road sakbeab. They called them whiteways, raised limestone causeways that linked temples, plazas, and ball courts. Yes, ball courts. The Maya had an actual sport with rules. Spectators, and just enough risk of decapitation to keep things interesting. You walk the edge of one. Now the space between sloped walls, narrowing toward stone rings, set high above the ground. The goal was to pass a heavy rubber ball through that tiny hole without using your hands or feet. Sounds impossible. It mostly was. But someone always pulled it off, possibly earning glory, or depending on the city and era, the honor of being sacrificed. Historians still debate whether the victors or the losers were the ones sacrificed. Because nothing says you win quite like ritual death. Or maybe you just got a nice meal and a feather cape. Honestly, it varied. Off to your right, a plaza opens wide and flat, the stones still tight-fitted after over 1,000 years. You step out onto it and hear your footsteps echo softly, your rubber soles whispering over stone, like they're unsure they belong. Spoiler, they don't. This city, Tikal, most likely once housed over 60,000 people. Think about that. Not a scattering of huts. A full-on metropolis with nobles, engineers, cooks, traders, and very tired workers who probably muttered curses in ancient Maya as they hauled stone blocks up steep pyramid ramps without wheels. You duck into a partially collapsed structure. Inside, it's surprisingly cool. A narrow window lets in a sliver of light illuminating red pigment on the walls. Murals. The colors have faded but not disappeared. You can still see faces. Headdresses, gestures frozen mid-conversation. One figure holds a staff. Another seems to be pointing, possibly giving directions. Or maybe just really passionate about where lunch is coming from. It's quiet now, but this room was likely an administrative hub, somewhere between City Hall and a gossip chamber. The elite of the city. Yes, there were elites, controlled trade priesthoods, war strategy, and probably the best cocoa. Ah, cocoa. The Maya drank it hot spiced, sometimes with chili. Served it in intricately carved vessels. In fact, some tombs had chocolate residue still clinging to cups. Imagine dying so fancy that even your grave gets hot chocolate. Not bad. You walk further into what was once a residential quarter. Not everyone lived in the pyramids, obviously. Most people lived in stone or wooden homes grouped in compounds. Families stuck together. Cooked outside. Made tools. Watched kids chase each other around the garden. All while massive temples loomed nearby, casting both literal and social shadows. You pass a low wall and find yourself in a courtyard where someone's great something once planted beans. The ground is hard-packed, the corners worn from movement. You sit briefly on a flat stone, probably a seat, hopefully not a toilet. Around you, the hum of insects is constant. Time here is thick, not measured in minutes, but in centuries. You start to feel it too, that odd awareness that you're walking through layers of time, and that history isn't behind you, it's beneath you. Above the trees, spider monkeys swing and chatter like rude aerial tour guides. Below them, the forest creaks, always growing, always swallowing. And here you are, wedged in between the stone bones of a lost civilization and the living green that refuses to leave it alone. You walk back towards the central complex and pause at a series of carved altars. Some depict kings. Others show captives kneeling. One has a jaguar with feathers on its back and what might be a speech bubble. No one's quite sure what it means. A poem, a law. A joke. That's the thing with the Maya script. We've cracked much of it, but not all. Even today, archaeologists argue over interpretations. One glyph might say glorious conquest. Another might just mean, don't touch this. It's cursed. Same energy, really. You run your fingers across the grooves. The craftsmanship is delicate. You picture the sculptor sweating in the heat, chipping away stone to tell someone else's story. And now, over 1,000 years later, you're the one reading it badly slowly, and with absolutely no context. The sun begins to dip. Orange light slices through the trees and bathes the pyramid in warm gold. For a moment, it doesn't look like ruin at all. It looks like it's waiting. You wonder if the people who lived here thought it would last forever. All cities do, don't they? Especially when the temples are tall, the cocoa is flowing, and the ball games are good. But forever is a funty word in the jungle. Here, everything gets recycled. Even power. Even stone. For part 3, the ground beneath your feet hardens on as you move into the heart of ritual space. You're not alone. Not exactly figures painted on walls. Follow your every move, with eyes the size of fists and expressions that are difficult to read. Somewhere between divine authority and you forgot the sacred guacamole again. This is where the gods lived. Or rather, where the Maya believed they could meet them. Temples towered into the sky, not just because it looked impressive, which it did, but because the higher you climbed, the closer you were to the heavens. You stare up one of these staircases, impossibly steep, flanked by crumbling balustrades that once supported processions of incense and feathers. Your knees ache just looking at it. Sacrifice in this context included a lot of uphill walking. At the top, or what you assume is the top, there's a chamber barely big enough for 3 people and 2 very awkward silences. Inside charred stone hints at years of incense burning. A niche in the wall may have held idols now long vanished. But the vibe, still here. Thick, spicy, and waiting. You catch a flicker in your imagination. Priests in elaborate jaguar skin cloaks, chanting names of gods that sound like thunder and rainfall. There's a drumbeat somewhere in the distance, your memory, or the jungle, hard to tell. This is a place where blood was spilled not for cruelty, but for cosmic balance. See, the Maya believed the gods fed the world, but they got hungry. A lot. And what do you feed divine beings who invented the sun well? Blood. Your own, ideally. Sometimes others. There's even evidence that rulers and elites practiced auto-sacrifice, drawing their own blood with stingray spines. Yes, stingray. Spine. Now, if you're flinching, you're not alone. Modern scholars still shudder a little. But back then, it was sacred. Serious. Part of the job description. King of Tikal must be good at speeches, alliances, and poking holes in yourself for the gods. You take a step back, imagining a crowd gathered below this temple. Thousands of faces turned up, eyes wide with reverence, or curiosity, or boredom, depending on the drama level that day. Incense smoke, drifting like whispers. Drums, flutes, and the occasional parrot scream, adding ambiance. The gods they worshipped weren't passive deities smiling from clouds. These gods had tempers, responsibilities, and vivid personalities. There was Itzamna, the creator, and Chak, the rain god, who probably got blamed when your crops failed. Ixchel, the goddess of childbirth and medicine, and the hero twins, those mythic pranksters who once turned the underworld into a chaotic prank war. It's a pantheon that feels less like a distant religion and more like a divine soap opera with excellent costumes. And here's your weird but true fact of the day. There's solid evidence that some ritual ceremonies involved dancing in elaborate headdresses made of real bird feathers, jade, and even human fingernails. Decorative or disturbing historians still debate whether that was standard or an occasional flair for special rituals. You step out from under the temple's shadow and back into the plaza, the ground warm beneath your feet now. There's a platform ahead, a flat stone slab, perfectly square. You're pretty sure it's where sacrifices took place, but weirdly, it's not gory. There's no sense of violence in the air, just solemnity. It's not horror. It's theater. The Maya believed in cycles. Life and death, day and night season, and drought and season again. Sacrifice wasn't a tragic finale. It was the reset button, the offering. And sure, to modern ears it sounds dramatic. But let's be honest, if your entire agriculture system depended on rain showing up on time, and all it took was a symbolic offering and a feathered headdress dance party, you might consider it too. Now don't get carried away. You're not joining a cult. You're just standing here in the ruins of a city that once sang with ritual. A city where people memorized long prayers, fasted before ceremonies, and passed down songs you'll never hear. And while this plaza is empty now, it doesn't feel abandoned. It feels paused, like everyone stepped away for a moment and never came back. The forest, as always, has crept in to fill the silence. Vines curl around the corners of altars. Ferns push up between floor stones. A sapling sprouts from the base of a wall like a tiny green rebellion. The gods haven't left. They're just buried beneath roots and moss, dreaming in languages we've only half deciphered. You lean against a column and the stone is cool again. A breeze stirs the canopy overhead. It's almost musical. The rustle, the insect hum, the monkey squeals like badly timed laughter tracks. You close your eyes, and for a moment, the plaza fills with people again. Laughter, ceremony, a flute made from bone, a shout in a language that once held the stars in its grammar. Then it's gone again. Just the trees, just you, and maybe someone still watching from the top of the pyramid. You take a slow step down from the sacred platform shoes, clicking softly on stone that once soaked up the footsteps of 1,000 daily lives, priest, nobles, merchants, even the guy who probably kept dropping beans on the temple stairs and getting yelled at for it. Now the road shifts. Less divine, more domestic. You follow a narrow path flanked by low stone walls, some so worn they look like the ruins of ruins. But these weren't palaces or altars. These were homes, everyday homes. This is where the magic wore sandals and stubbed its toe. You crouch beside one of the structures, its rectangular shape still visible, beneath a pile of fallen debris and leaves. The floors were once plastered and whitewashed. The walls may have been painted. The roof thatched, long gone now. Inside may be a stone bench, a fire pit, some tools carved from obsidian. A pot half buried under centuries of dirt, still holding the ghost of its last meal. You imagine the heat, the smoke curling out of the cooking pit, the crackle of masa hitting the griddle. Someone humming, someone yelling. A toddler running around with a carved jaguar toy, while an older sibling pretends they're helping by smashing maize with the pestle. This is the heart of Maya life. And while the pyramids might have touched the gods, it was the kitchens that kept the world turning. You walk on, ducking under a low arch. The next courtyard opens to several small homes facing each other. A family compound. Maybe two. The Maya lived in clusters, often extended families sharing space, labor, and complaints about whose turn it was to clean up after the turkey. And yes, they had turkeys. Domesticated. Not just for eating, but sometimes for rituals. One glyph shows a turkey dressed in ceremonial feathers, possibly annoyed but beautifully accessorized. You sit for a moment on a flat stone, once a stool maybe, or a convenient step. The ground smells of damp earth and sun-warmed leaves. You hear the distant flutter of wings. Something rustles a little too close in the underbrush, but you decide it's probably just a squirrel and not, say, a reincarnated noble checking on the property value. A breeze moves through the ruins like memory, and you can almost hear it, someone calling to a cousin to fetch water. Someone else cursing at a stubborn fire. A grandmother telling a story about the rain, Fodchaak, and how he once sneezed a rainbow. Then from the trees, the faint thump, thump, thump of drums. Not real ones, just your imagination now echoing with how this place must have sounded when the marketplace opened at dawn. You walk toward it instinctively. The market would have been at the city's heart, or at least close enough to the plaza to keep people moving in and out with gossip and tomatoes. It was loud, always loud. People shouting about beans, fish, obsidian blades, cocoa, salt, jade, even pets. Yes, there's record of people trading parrots and dogs. One noble apparently had a pet deer. Because nothing says high status like, look at my fashionable hoofed companion. And it wasn't just stuff, it was news. Kopan declared war again. The king's son is marrying a girl from Kalakmul scandal. There's going to be a solar eclipse, and the priest says we should all fast except him. You pass a series of wide, shallow platforms where vendors once laid out goods, textiles, pottery baskets, probably snacks. You'd kill for some roasted plantains right about now, or at least a tortilla that isn't from a bag. In the center, there's a round stone where you swear you see scorch marks. A cooking fire, rebuilt again and again by the people who needed warmth food, and occasionally an excuse to stand around complaining about prices. And there's another thing: the Maya weren't isolated. They traded widely. Obsidian from the highlands, salt from coastal lagoons, jade from Guatemala, feathers from the tropics, and cocoa. So much cocoa. Used as money too, which honestly sounds like a better system than most cryptocurrencies. But even in this bustling vision, you feel the tension, because while markets thrived, so did hierarchy. Not everyone was drinking spiced chocolate in gold-rimmed cups. Most were farmers, workers, women grinding maize before sunrise again and again in a rhythm that never really changed. Children learning which roots not to eat. Men carving limestone blocks and praying their backs held out one more year. You walk past a crumbling structure that was probably nicer than the others. It's got stone steps, a platform, even decorative carving along one corner. A noble's house, maybe a mid-level administrator. Someone important enough to complain loudly when the neighbors held noisy ceremonies at 4 a.m. Inside, the space is open. No furniture, just a sense of space. You can almost see the mats on the floor, the reed baskets, the walls hung with painted cloth. You reach out and touch the corner of the wall, smooth, still, faintly warm from the sun. And just like that, the whole city starts to feel real. Not just impressive, not just mystical, but livable, human. You can imagine the seasons passing, rain hammering down then, long, brittle, dry spells. People falling in love, growing old. Arguing, making up, praying, dancing, dying, and being remembered in family stories long after their names were carved into nothing. You're not in a ruin, you're in a neighborhood, and everyone just stepped out for a minute. You leave the homes behind with a final glance, part longing, part nosy tourist guilt, and follow a raised path toward what must have been the administrative core. The jungle quiets here, like even the parrots know to lower their voices. The air is thicker, heavier. You don't know if it's history or humidity, but it's definitely doing something to your neck. Ahead, a structure looms partially collapsed, yet still dignified, in that I survived 15 centuries and 2 hurricanes kind of way. This was once the seat of power. A palace, a council hall, possibly both. You step across its threshold through a door framed by stone glyphs. Some are weathered past recognition, others sharp enough to make you feel like someone just carved them yesterday and then casually time-traveled away. Inside the walls narrow into a long corridor. Light filters in from slits in the ceiling, casting golden streaks across the floor like divine spotlights. The room beyond opens wide with benches carved into the walls, and the remnants of painted murals barely clinging to stone. This is where decisions were made, some ordinary like water distribution or land use. Others, less so. Like, should we declare war on those jerks over in Naranjo, or is it time to sacrifice someone again? Or just release a strongly worded stela? You sit where someone powerful once sat. Maybe a king or a counselor with a really strong opinions about the weather gods. The room echoes with what might have been whispered strategy or passive-aggressive priest debates. You imagine a voice calm, educated, tired of explaining for the 5th time that eclipses are not personal attacks. And then you hear it again. Glyphs, painted or carved, everywhere. You follow one panel along the wall, your fingers hovering just over the stone. The script winds and curls like an art piece, like music frozen in limestone. The Maya script is one of the most complex writing systems ever developed in the ancient world. They didn't just use simple sounds. They blended phonetics, symbols, metaphors, layered meanings. It's part sentence, part pun, part cosmic riddle, which honestly is probably why we still can't agree on half of it. Historians still debate whether some inscriptions are historical records or mythological reenactments, or both. The Maya did love a good narrative twist. In the center of the room lies a table, broad cracked, but unmistakably placed with purpose. This is where they wrote. Not on scrolls, but on codices books made from bark paper, folded accordion style, filled with vivid illustrations and meticulous glyphs. Very few have survived. Thanks, colonial bonfires. You pause at this imagined desk and imagine the scribes hunched brush in hand, tongue probably poking out in concentration. They weren't just record keepers. They were astronomers, artists, historians, maybe even stand-up philosophers. One might have been writing something as you walked in. You lean in. There's still color visible on a mural fragment, red ochre faded green, maybe the edge of a feathered serpent, or a king mid-speech. And next to it, almost hidden, a smaller glyph cluster that translates loosely as time wraps itself around everything. You blink. That hits harder than expected. Moving past the mural, you find another room smaller, darker, the kind of space where secrets happen. You duck through a doorway and feel a chill. This might have been a private chamber for high priests or nobles, maybe a treasury, or maybe the ancient equivalent of an HR department for managing political scandals and weird celestial omens. You step carefully over a cracked floor tile and into a raised alcove. There's a circular stone on the wall, more decorative than structural. Around it, more glyphs and a carving of a star. Not a 5-pointed one, an actual star one they must have tracked in the night sky. The Maya were obsessed with the heavens. They tracked Venus religiously, built observatories aligned with solstices. Their calendar was so accurate, it makes your digital watch look lazy. They had multiple cycles running simultaneously, Tzolk'in Hab long count, all interwoven like a cosmic gear system. It wasn't just about time. It was about prophecy, identity, fate. And with that thought, you realize they weren't just planning crop rotations. They were reading the sky like a script, looking for signs, warnings. You remember the feeling from earlier, the pressure in the air, the hush of the leaves. That wasn't just atmosphere. That was unease, a growing sense that something wasn't right. The stars shifting in ways that felt wrong. Rain arriving late, or not at all. Back in the council room, you notice something carved into the base of a column. It looks rushed, not decorative, almost desperate. A prayer, maybe, or a warning. One word appears again and again, Chak, the rain god. They were pleading, and maybe no one listened. You exit the palace slowly, feet dragging. The sunlight outside feels too bright after all that shadowed memory. You squint up at the trees and imagine someone 1,000 years ago doing the same, emerging from a meeting with bad news and no solution. The Maya world was a web political alliances city. Rivalries, celestial predictions, and agricultural fragility. A slight shift in any thread could send vibrations through the whole net. And here you are, tangled in the echo of their uncertainty. The jungle path feels tighter now, like the trees have inched a little closer while you weren't looking. You duck under a low-hanging branch and notice the air has changed. It's tense, not like something's watching, but like the world's holding its breath. You're heading into conflict. No more temples, no more kitchens. This is the outer edge of the city, where the politics sharpened into spears. The Maya weren't a single empire. They were a collection of city-states. Tikal Kalakmul, Kopan, Palenque, each with its own kings, priests, ego problems, and deeply held belief that they were the chosen ones. Peace was rare. War, more like a default setting. You follow the remnants of a sakbe, a white stone road that once connected cities. It looks harmless now, just a moss-covered trail winding through the undergrowth. But if you listen close, the Maya didn't fight with metal. No bronze, no iron. They made war with obsidian blades, spears, atlatls, and hardwood clubs. You're picturing something primitive, maybe don't? Obsidian can be sharper than surgical steel. It cuts quietly, cleanly. You step over what might have once been a checkpoint, just 2 stone posts now leaning like tired sentries. This was a border, a defense line, a place where city turned into contested space. The tension wasn't just about territory, it was legacy. Trade routes, bloodlines, religious honor. One city stealing another's sacred stela was the ancient version of cyber warfare, except with way more feathers and passive-aggressive murals. You move into a clearing and find them 2 stelae side by side. One has been knocked over its face, half buried in dirt. The other still stands, but its carvings are defaced. Someone scratched out the glyphs, erased the name of a king. This wasn't vandalism. This was politics. You imagine it now. A rival city's warriors, marching through the forest, masses painted, voices low. They weren't going to destroy the city necessarily, just humiliate it. Take captives, burn a temple or 2, kidnap a scribe. You know standard diplomatic messaging, But some wars went bigger. Tikal and Calakmul fought what could only be described as ancient Mesoamerican Game of Thrones. For centuries they wrestled for dominance, formed and broke alliances, hosted royal marriages with smiles and daggers under the table. Cities rose and fell based on who backed whom. And don't think the wars were constant bloodbaths. They were strategic, surgical. A ruler might invade just to install a puppet king, or steal some cacao-rich territory, or in one spectacular case, abduct a rival's ballgame champion and make him perform in the victor's city like a very awkward sports exchange student. You weave through the trees and find the remnants of what looks like a military encampment. Low stone walls, a fire pit, maybe even a training yard. You pause beside a circular target deep gouges mark where spear points once struck. You imagine a commander standing nearby, arms crossed, grumbling that someone's throwing too high again. And here's your odd fact of the section. Some Maya warriors wore armor made of cotton, not fluffy sweaters. Tight quilted cotton soaked in brine and left to harden. Surprisingly effective. Not so great in the rain, but hey. Style points for innovation. You press further on and find a pile of stones that were once a watchtower. The view from here dense forest, but with just enough clearance to spot incoming travelers or enemies. You sit for a moment, letting the breeze cool your neck. You wonder how many pairs of eyes once scanned this horizon, waiting for the flicker of movement that meant danger. Inside the tower's base, a carving catches your eye. Two figures facing off, one holding a shield, the other a staff. Above them, a glyph that might mean storm, or argument, or both. Translating ancient Maya is basically guesswork with good intentions. Historians still debate whether large-scale wars were common or just well documented when they did happen. But here, surrounded by silent monuments and broken stones, it feels very real. You can feel the heat of adrenaline, the press of bodies in tight jungle paths, the rush of night raids and burning thatch. You step away, brushing dirt from your palms, and notice something strange, a tiny figurine lying in the undergrowth. It's clay, barely intact, shaped like a bird. Probably once belonged to a child, or maybe an offering before battle. You pick it up gently, then turn it to the ground. This wasn't just soldiers fighting soldiers. Cities went to war with farmers, potters, scribes, cooks. War didn't visit politely. It sat at the family table and asked for seconds. You walk back toward the main road, following the shape of a trench, now swallowed by ferns. It was likely a defensive ditch, but now it's just a scar, a reminder, because even the fiercest city falls eventually. Even obsidian blades rust in memory, and behind every glorious mural of a warrior king, there's someone. Maybe lots of someones who didn't get to come home. You follow a dry gully carved long ago by rain that doesn't come anymore. It twists like a lazy snake through the jungle, its floor cracked and littered with brittle leaves. The air is quiet now, not the sacred hush of temples or the anxious stillness of battlefields, but something heavier. This part of the story is about the drought. You reach what used to be a reservoir, a massive human-dug depression lined with stone. The Maya called them aguadas. They stored precious water for the dry season, gathering rainfall during the wet months like a communal lifeline. But right now, it's bone dry, and it hasn't just recently dried up. This place has been empty a long, long time. You can tell by the way weeds have dared to sprout in the cracks. You step carefully along the edge, watching for loose stones. Down in the middle, you spot the faint outline of a channel, a little stone trough that once guided runoff from a building above. It's clogged now, filled with mud, hardened into sculpture. Someone once chiseled that shape. Someone else probably cursed when it got blocked. The Maya were water engineers. Brilliant ones. They diverted rivers, built underground cisterns, filtered water with sand and limestone. Cities like Tikal depended on systems like this one to hold thousands of people steady through months of relentless sun. And then one year the rain didn't come, not just once, again and again. Tree ring analysis and lake sediment studies show a series of intense droughts in the late Classic period, roughly between 800 and 1000 CE. Whole regions dried out, rain patterns collapsed. The crops, the corn, the beans, the squash failed. Repeatedly, historians still debate whether the droughts were the primary cause of the Maya collapse or just the final straw. But standing here, ankle-deep in dry leaves where water once shimmered, you feel it. This wasn't an isolated bad harvest. It was a multi-generational stress fracture. You walk away from the reservoir and into a field of terraces stepped plots carved into hillsides to trap soil and water. They're clever, elegant, exhausted. The stone walls have crumbled, and the earth they once held in place is slipping away. You kick at the dirt, and it crumbles like stale cake. Someone tried to hold it together. Someone tried to believe the rains would return. Maybe they did. But not enough. Not fast enough. Nearby, you find a shrine built to Chak, the rain god. His face is unmistakable. Long nose, wide eyes, mouth curled in a permanent weather report. The altar below is cracked, its edges eroded by time and perhaps frustration. Offerings were made here, prayers whispered, blood spilled. People begging the sky to change, but the clouds stayed silent. You sit on a half-toppled stone and take it in the abandoned terraces. The cracked reservoir, the distant canopy shimmering with indifferent sunlight. You can almost hear the conversations that must have filled this space. Just a little longer. The priest says next month, maybe we need to sacrifice more. And that creeping suspicion, what if the gods aren't listening anymore? The Maya believed the world was cyclical. That time repeated itself in grand loops. Maybe that comforted them. Maybe it didn't. Because when the corn doesn't grow, and your kids are hungry, knowing it might get better again in 394 years isn't exactly helpful. You press your hand to a nearby wall. The stone is hot. Not warm hot. The kind of heat that lingers after sunset. The kind of heat that makes you want to scream at the sky and dig deeper, even when you know there's nothing left to find. That's what they did. Some cities built bigger temples. Some performed more frequent sacrifices. Others, turned inward, became isolated paranoid. Rivalries sharpened. Leaders promised salvation. Priests rechecked the stars. But the rain still didn't come. And here's your weird fact of the day. There's evidence that during these droughts, some Maya elites took to importing water, actually hauling it over long distances to keep their palaces stocked. While the peasants withered in the sun, the nobility bathed in relief. It's almost comforting how little has changed in 1,200 years. You move through the scrub feet, kicking dust until you come upon a statue lying face down. You flip it gently. A king, maybe, or a priest. He's smiling, at least he was. His face is worn smooth now, eyes erased, mouth chipped into a half grin. You wonder what he promised, what he told the people when the reservoirs dried and the harvest failed. That the gods were testing them, that salvation was close, that they just needed more patience, more faith, more blood. You don't know, and neither did he. The sun dips lower. Shadows lengthen. The air grows thicker again, like even the jungle is trying to remember what rain feels like. You wipe sweat from your brow and think this wasn't a collapse that came with an explosion. No great battle. No apocalypse. Just the slow, grinding erosion of hope under a sun that refused to blink. The forest is quieter than before, but not in a peaceful way. It's the kind of quiet that makes you look over your shoulder like the trees might be listening. You've passed temples' homes, battlefields, and the shrines of thirsty gods, but now you're standing on the outskirts of what was once farmland, or what tried to be farmland. The ground under your feet is dry, cracked, and faintly acidic. You kick at the soil, and it powders like ash. This used to be fertile land shaped carefully by generations of farmers who understood the seasons like a second language. They rotated crops, built terraces, and used ash and compost to replenish what the harvest took. But even the most brilliant farmers can't grow corn in dust. You pass a broken wooden tool half buried in the ground, a digging stick maybe. You picture someone clutching it, squinting into the heat, stabbing it into hard soil that won't give an inch. You wonder how many seasons they tried before realizing the fields were dying under them. This is where it all started to come apart, not with fire, but with exhaustion. Cities needed food. The temples, the courts, the elite homes. With their cocoa-drinking nobles and murals of divine ancestors, none of that worked without maize and beans and squash. And as cities grew, so did their appetites. Farmers had to push farther out, cut more trees, build more terraces, scrape more nutrients from the land. But rainforest soil, for all its lush appearance, isn't generous. It's shallow, easily eroded. The trees keep it alive. Cut them down and you're basically farming on top of a thin layer of sand wearing a leaf costume. Historians still debate whether the Maya overfarmed because of greed or desperation. Probably both. Population growth, political pressure, climate change. It all collided right here where the cornfield stopped working. You find a collapsed granary, just a few stones marking where food was once stored. It's overgrown now, guarded by a tangle of vines and one very defensive iguana that glares at you like it owns the property rights. In the dust nearby, you see faint footprints, not real ones, but indentations in the pattern of the land, where people paced, hauled water, dug, replanted, and hoped. And when nothing came, they still came back the next morning. Hope is stubborn like that. You move downhill into what was once a village, not a big one, maybe a few dozen families. The homes are simple low walls, broken hearths, smashed pottery that no one had the strength or reason to clean up. You step over a sleeping stone and wonder, did they leave? Or did they stay until the very last grain? One house has a painted bowl still intact, tucked in a corner as if someone meant to come back for it. Red lines form a spiral inside. You can't tell if it's symbolic or just decorative. Either way, it feels like a message or a memory. You sit in the shade of a half-standing wall. The jungle hums around you. Bugs, birds, the distant crack of something moving through brush. Maybe an animal, maybe the wind, maybe time stretching its limbs. Nearby there's a circle of stones arranged deliberately. A family fire pit. You run your hand over one still blackened from old fires. It's cold now, and has been for centuries. Here's your odd fact of the day: the Maya didn't eat much salt. They had some, yes, especially near the coasts, but inland communities often lacked it, and the long droughts made that worse. Archaeologists have found evidence of increased tooth decay and bone stress in late classic populations. You lose the rain, you lose the crops, and eventually, you even lose your teeth. You stand and follow a narrow trail uphill. At the top, the view is eerie, a sprawling landscape of forest, yes, but also of ghost plots. Fields that were once squared and ordered now vanish into trees. You can feel the effort that went into carving civilization out of wilderness. And the forest barely noticed. It just waited patient as always. A rustle draws your attention. A spider monkey maybe, or just the wind pulling through what remains of a wall. You turn toward it and see a carving in the stone, deep, confident lines that spell out something long forgotten. A name, a date, a prayer. You trace it with your fingers. The stone is soft from erosion, but the shape holds. Someone carved this after the fields cracked and the corn died. Maybe a farewell, maybe a promise, because people didn't give up all at once. Cities didn't vanish in a weekend. It was a slow grind, 1,000 small breaks. A child's cough, a dry well, a missed planning, a whispered argument between leaders, a council meeting where nobody had good news, a king promising rain with a shaky smile. And still they built. They prayed. They walked the terraces with baskets and hope, and maybe a backup plan that never arrived. You step away from the carving and glance back across the dry fields, where the jungle is already creeping back in, like green toad swallowing stories. This is what collapse looks like, you think. Not a crash, not a scream, just quiet. The path dips again deeper into tangled growth, where the vines feel heavier, the air thicker, and something unnamed seems to press against your chest. You step over a toppled log, at least you think it's a log, and find yourself facing the edge of a once straight avenue, now choked with roots and silence. But you feel it's something cracked here. Not stone, not wood, but trust. This is where people started saying no. The Maya world worked because it was balanced between gods and kings, city and soil, the many and the few. And when things were good, that system hummed. Farmers farmed rulers, ruled scribes. Scribbled priests performed bloodletting, like they were unboxing divine approval on a live stream. But drought changes things. Hunger changes things. And desperation. Desperation rewrites rules. You duck beneath a broken lintel stone and enter what used to be a town square. It's modest, no towering pyramids or grand temples here. Just a central platform, a few side buildings, and a large stela that's been pushed over and shattered. That's not erosion. That's anger. The carving's face has been smashed deliberately. You kneel and run your fingers over the fragments. The glyphs are broken, the image of what was likely a noble or priest or king, scratched out like someone had too much time and a bone to pick. Literally, revolts weren't always armies with banners. Sometimes, they were farmers with sticks, laborers who stopped hauling stones, builders who decided not to rebuild that wall. Sometimes they just walked away, and the city had to beg them back. Historians still debate how widespread these uprisings were. There's little written evidence, probably because scribes didn't last long when rebellion showed up. But the physical signs are everywhere. Burned homes, abandoned temples, mutilated monuments, unfinished structures, left mid-construction. Like the workers dropped their tools and never returned. You pass a stairway where the top step is missing. Not crumbled taken. Repurposed maybe, or dragged away to smash something. Either way, someone wanted it gone. You picture the conversations. They say the king still has water. He promised the rains would return. My cousin died last week, no food. They want another sacrifice. No, just that one word. No. Spoken quietly at first, then louder, then chanted, then shouted as torches lit and murals were doused in smoke. You round a corner and enter a building that once served as a town hall, or maybe a storehouse. Inside, there's soot on the ceiling. You tilt your head and see where the fire licked upward, blackening everything. It didn't burn completely, just enough to send a message. In the corner, graffiti. Yes, graffiti. Not some kid carving a hardened initials. A jagged symbol scratched into the plaster, rough, repetitive, urgent. Archaeologists have found similar markings in collapsed buildings from this period. They weren't part of the official record, but they were part of the rage. Outside again, you follow a narrow path between buildings, their walls close enough to touch with both hands. One still has the remnants of a painted banner, red pigment, faded but defiant. You have no idea what it meant, but you imagine it was part declaration, part rebellion, part someone finally snapping and saying, "Enough." The jungle here is aggressive. It wraps around stone like it's reclaiming not just space, but memory. You push through a curtain of vines and find something strange. A statue fully intact, hidden behind a collapsed wall. The figure is seated, arms folded. Not a god, not a king, just a person. Maybe a thinker, a protester. A nobody who was tired of pretending things were fine. And nearby, a jaguar tooth necklace half buried in the dirt, left behind or dropped in a hurry. The pieces start to fall together. The city was fraying, infrastructure cracking, leaders scrambling, and somewhere, maybe here, maybe everywhere, people were rising, not in a dramatic Civil War way. In 1,000 tiny acts, skipping ceremonies, leaving food offerings out to rot, refusing to build, carving insults into stele, whispering forbidden names. You sit at the base of the statue and listen. Nothing. Not a bird, not a breeze. The quiet here feels like consequence. Here's your odd fact of the day. The Maya were obsessed with time, but not just time. With cycles. They believed history repeated not randomly, but rhythmically. Collapse wasn't failure. It was part of the pattern. A purge. A reset. You fall, you wait, you rise again. But for the people here, that idea doesn't help much when you're watching your city burn. You stand and follow a trail of toppled stones, each one bearing fragments of what might have been a story. A ruler holding a staff, a corn god. Frowning, a calendar symbol wiped clean. And then the trail ends at a wall. No doorway, no glyphs, just a blank slab of stone where something should be. Someone built this, closed it, sealed something in or kept something out. Kept something. You press your palm to the surface. It's warm, still holding the heat of the sun, still holding the memory of rebellion. Because here in these silent ruins, you've reached the point where the people stopped listening and started acting. You emerge from the overgrown alley into the open again. But now it's not a bustling plaza or a farmer's terrace, or the footsteps of rebellion. It's emptiness. Broad, cracked stones stretch out before you, with weeds poking through them, like they're claiming squatters' rights. The air here is still like even the wind got bored and moved on. The city is dead, not ruined, not collapsing, just abandoned. You glance back at the last wall you touched. The sealed stone. The scratched-out glyphs. The statue of a person who looked like they were done pretending. You blink, and now just a few feet away there's a courtyard where the birds don't even sing. You're in Karakol, maybe, or Kopan, one of the great cities that once lit up the rainforest with markets, music, and murals, and then just stopped. Not in a dramatic blaze, but a slow unraveling. You wander through the dust of what was once a capital and feel that unraveling echo in your bones. There's a pyramid here, a big one, taller than it looks, even under the jungle's green grasp. But you don't bother climbing it. You already know what you'll find. More silence, more trees, maybe a bird's nest in the spot where a king once prayed. You walk past a ball court so worn down it could pass for a sunken garden. The rings are missing. The murals are faded. But the space is still shaped like memory. Like the earth itself hasn't forgotten what used to happen here. Off to the side, you spot a building still standing, but only barely. Its roof has caved in. The doorway is clogged with leaves, and something small and furry dashes out as you approach. You both jump. You apologize as if the animal owns the deed. Inside, it smells like mildew and old dust. You push past a curtain of vines and spot something painted on the far wall. It's hard to see in the dim light, but it looks like a procession figures in feathered cloaks walking in a long line. They're headed toward a temple, but the temple is unfinished. That's not a metaphor. It's literally unfinished. The paint trails off. The wall was never completed. You back away, staring at it. Did the artist stop working one day and just never return? Did they plan to come back tomorrow, next week after the drought? Did they think they had time? You step outside again and hear nothing. No chatter, no drums, no incense, no foot traffic, just the jungle's slow inhale. Cities like this didn't die because everyone ran out screaming. They died because people left one by one. Maybe a family decided to try life in a smaller village. Maybe a merchant packed up and realized the markets weren't worth the walk anymore. Maybe a priest closed the temple doors quietly and didn't say why. Eventually, there were just more monkeys than people. The jungle moved back in like a forgotten roommate, returning with leafy luggage and no plans to leave. Here's your odd fact of the day. Some of the last glyphs written in cities like Kopan and Karakol don't record victories or rituals. They record desperation, mentions of failed alliances, starvation, a calendar date with no celebration attached. One of them simply lists a ruler's name, and nothing else. Historians still debate whether these cities fell quickly or rotted. Slowly, most evidence points to the latter. One temple began sinking into a swamp after no one maintained the drainage system. Another collapsed because tree roots burst through its foundations like angry snakes. You walk now along what was once a ceremonial path, wide enough for processions, now narrowed by moss and fallen stone. You picture what it used to be: kings in golden robes, priests with incense pots, children tossing flower petals, spectators holding their breath. As a solar eclipse began, everyone trying to believe their world would last forever. And yet now a fig tree has punched straight through the middle of the avenue. Its roots have lifted stones like they were plastic toys. A palace wall nearby has collapsed outward, like it just sighed too hard, and gave up. You pass a doorway with no roof. A mural on the inside shows a ruler seated on a throne, surrounded by servants. His face is intact, regal stern, and someone much later carved a single jagged line through his chest. Maybe it was a message, maybe a symbol, maybe just someone trying to feel like they had the last word. You reach the far end of the plaza and look back. What's left is beautiful. Still. Grand. But it's haunted not by ghosts, but by absence. This was once a city of thousands. Of planners and poets, traders and farmers, lovers and liars. They built a world so complex, so stunning, that it still leaves archaeologists shaking their heads. And then one day, it was quiet. Someone swept the temple steps for the last time. Someone stirred a pot and realized there was nothing left to cook. Someone said goodbye and meant it, and the jungle waited. It always does. The trail ahead isn't a trail anymore. It's a suggestion, a crease in the undergrowth that someone might have walked once. Maybe a merchant. Maybe a child chasing a parrot. Maybe a priest carrying the last of the sacred cocoa beans like they were gold bricks. You follow it anyway, ducking beneath hanging vines and sidestepping exposed roots like ribs poking through the earth's skin. And then, like a secret clearing in a dream, it opens a marketplace, or what used to be one. You recognize the outlines first. Stone platforms arranged in a wide semicircle, walkways between them. Flat open space in the middle. The bones of a busy plaza, but it's empty. No vendors shouting about obsidian blades. No musicians. No bartering. No suspiciously underweight baskets of maize. Just birds nesting in a crumbled corner, and something that might be a wild squash plant growing out of a crack in the stone. You step onto the main platform, imagining the colors that once lived here. Fabrics, feathers, clay vessels. People laughing, arguing, flirting while choosing tomatoes. And then, one day they didn't come back. Trade dried up just like the rivers. The plazas echoed. The stalls stood abandoned. Even the roomers packed their bags and left. You move toward a shadowed alcove at the plaza's edge, where a small structure still holds its shape. Inside, shelves carved into the walls hold shards of pottery, a broken grinder, and a single obsidian knife. Not a weapon, this one's delicate. Ceremonial, maybe. Or just a fancy fruit slicer. On the wall is a carving of two hands exchanging a bowl. The bowl is empty. You step back slowly, feeling like you've just interrupted a moment that never ended. This is what trade collapse looks like. Not chaos. Silence. The Maya economy wasn't just built on food. It was built on networks. Coastal salt inland. Jade cacao beans, traded like coins obsidian from the highlands. Cotton textiles. Feathers so bright, they made birds jealous. These weren't just items. They were symbols. Status. Structure. Supply. But as cities faltered, those threads frayed. Roads became overgrown. Ambassadors didn't show up. Markets shrank. Traders vanished. And the cities that once pulsed with exchange just stopped pulsing. You walk back into the sunlight, and it hits you how visible everything is now. The forest used to keep things hidden, but not here. Here the collapse is laid bare. Even the trees seem less protective, like they've already claimed this space and are just waiting for you to leave. You climb a short staircase, cautious of the moss slick on each step, and find yourself in front of a half-buried dwelling. This one was fancy once: pillars, decorative plaster, what might have been a private garden. Inside, a long stone seat spans one wall, and beside it, a human tooth. Just one. You crouch, eyeing the surroundings. A mortar, bits of shell, more pottery, and then over in the corner, a pile of bones. Animal mostly, but mixed in a few too large, too straight. You don't move closer. Tooth decay increased dramatically in the later Classic period. Archaeologists link it to worsening diets. Less variety, more processed maize. When food systems collapse, so do teeth. It's not the most glamorous evidence of societal breakdown, but it's one of the most human. You leave the house and head toward a structure that seems more intact than the rest. Its roof, stone sloped, is still mostly standing. Inside, you find a long table carved from a single slab. Dust covers it now, but you can still see faint etchings, concentric circles, glyphs, what might be a calendar. This could have been a council room, or a trading chamber, or just a place where scribes sat and panicked together. On one wall is a faint mural so faded it's almost invisible. You squint and catch the shape of a man holding a bag. He's surrounded by others, all reaching out. The bag is open, empty, and underneath a single glyph. Still sharp, still deliberate. It means loss, not battle, not punishment, just loss. Historians still debate whether the collapse was sudden or gradual. The truth is, it was both. For some cities, it came fast: rebellion, drought, abandonment. For others, it was slower. Systems eroding like teeth in sugar. One less trader, one more empty home. One less market day. Outside, you find yourself in a garden overtaken by vines. Once this would have grown herbs, peppers, maybe flowers. Now it grows nothing but time. You sit for a moment on a cracked bench, watching the ants work. They seem unbothered. Maybe they don't care about gods or kings or vanished economies. They just carry crumbs and march forward like they always have. Your odd fact of the day: the Maya brewed a kind of fermented drink from honey and tree bark balchet. It wasn't just a party drink. It was sacred, offered to gods, used in rituals, even given to the sick as medicine. But when the trade routes fell apart, so did access to the bark used in brewing it, which means even the rituals tasted worse. You look around at the bones of this city, its markets, its home, its missing cups of balchet, and you feel the weight of everything they built just to keep the rhythm going. And when the rhythm stopped, so did they. The path curls upward now, climbing into higher ground, where the air thins and the canopy breaks open just enough to let shafts of dusty sunlight pour through. It's quieter up here, but not empty. This part of the forest feels watched, not by people, but by the architecture itself. You've arrived at the temples that never quite died. Not the grand ones, not the ceremonial centers, surrounded by plazas and scribes and cocoa-sipping elites. These are tucked away, halfway swallowed by hills and branches, their stairways split by tree roots, and their roofs collapsed into their own memories. But still they stand. The first one you see is barely recognizable. It's covered in moss and strangler figs, their roots draped over the stone like melted wax. A vine winds across the entryway, framing it like a curtain nobody's dared to part in centuries. You push it aside gently and duck into the gloom. Inside, the space is musty and warm. The ceiling sags, but it holds. You run your fingers along the wall and find traces of red paint still clinging where sunlight couldn't reach. Not images, just color. A memory of worship in pigment. There's a stone table at the center, simple, elegant. Its top is cracked, but it hasn't collapsed. Beside it, a bowl, still intact. You don't touch it, you don't need to. Someone used this. Maybe not for the gods, maybe not at the height of empire, but after the priests were gone, after the nobles left, after the scribes stopped writing, someone stayed, and they kept praying. You leave the chamber and climb to the temple roof. Well, what's left of the roof? From here, you can see treetops stretching to every horizon, the stone tips of other structures peeking through the green like shy memories. This was the view the last believers saw, not parades, not festivals, just jungle, and maybe a handful of other people holding on to stories, while the rest of the world let go. You descend and move toward the next temple, stepping carefully over stones that used to be staircases, and now resemble geological laundry piles. As you walk, you notice symbols etched along the walls, not just glyphs, but spirals, handprints, animals. A snake here, a jaguar there, a human face mouth open as if singing or warning or yawning, it's hard to say. Some of them are upside down. That's not a mistake. In Maya symbolism, the underworld Xibalba wasn't always below. It could be anywhere. Through caves, beneath temples, hidden in water. The gods of death weren't monsters. They were part of the system, necessary, not feared so much as respected. You duck into another shrine, this one smaller. The roof is gone. The walls lean inward like they're tired of holding themselves up. A bird cries overhead, but you don't look up. Your eyes are drawn to the altar at the center, this one broken clean in half. At its base, stones have been arranged in a pattern. Not natural. Someone made this long after the altar fell. A sun shape. Radiating. A message, a ritual, a desperate little. Please. Historians still debate whether post-collapse Maya communities continued religious practice, uninterrupted, or if belief fractured into dozens of new hyper-local systems. Maybe the old gods stayed. Maybe new ones took their place. Maybe people lit incense out of habit. Maybe out of fear. You step outside again and notice something new: fig trees. Lots of them. Not the kind you plant for fruit. These are killer figs. They drop roots onto structures, wrapping them like skeletal fingers. And when they find cracks in the stone, they slip in and slowly, over decades, tear everything apart. There's one wrapped around a temple to your right. Its roots cascade down like ropes, holding the temple and destroying it at the same time. You stand and stare, because this is it. This is the jungle taking the stories back. You move toward another mound, less a building, more a bulge in the earth. But you know what it is. A temple pyramid. The trees are younger than the stone. You climb anyway, fingers gripping vines, feet slipping on damp stone. At the top, you find a platform no bigger than a dining room. It's cracked, uneven, and filled with leaves. But in the center, a mask is carved into the floor, huge, stylized, deeply weathered. A god, maybe. Or the idea of one. You sit beside it, watching the light change over its face. You don't need to know its name to know what it was meant to do. It watched. It waited. It bore witness. Here's your odd fact of the day. Many Maya temples were aligned with specific stars or planetary movements, especially Venus, which they tracked with almost unnerving precision. Some temples were designed so that light would strike a particular point exactly during a solstice or Venus rising. But now the stars still come, and the light still strikes, but no one stands in the temple to catch it. No one sings the old songs. No one thanks Chak for the rain. No one kneels at dawn to whisper their ancestors' names. You sit there until the sky turns gold, then gray, until the birds grow quiet, until the forest starts whispering bedtime again. And beneath you, beneath, the stone, beneath, the fig tree's crushing roots, the jungle breathes in, and the temple forgets your name. You wake the next morning, or maybe it's the same night. Time has started to wobble here, and you follow a narrow deer path deeper into the jungle, moving slower now. Your legs are tired, your shirt clings to your back, and everything around you smells of damp bark and slow decay. There's no road, no glyph-covered steps or towering pyramids, just tree trunks and silence and the occasional flutter of something that could be a bird or a ghost or a very fast leaf. And then you see it. A cave mouth yawning low and wide between roots and rocks, like the jungle opened its mouth mid-sentence and forgot what it was saying. You pause. Something in you knows this isn't just any cave. This is where the last scribes went. You step inside. It takes a moment for your eyes to adjust. The outside light filters through like gray syrup. The walls drip with moisture. Your feet crunch over pebbles and long-dead beetles. The air is cooler here finally, but heavier. You're not alone, not in the creepy sense, not in a ghost story way, but in the way you can feel someone's work still living in the stone. The Maya believed caves were sacred, entrances to Xibalba, the underworld. They weren't scary, they were places of power, mystery, reflection. Priests came here, rulers too. But in the end, as the temples above crumbled the last ones, who truly believed came here not to pray, but to write. Your flashlight, or maybe just your eyes, about they're part of this dream, catches the first glyphs, low on the cave wall, small, precise, painted in faded black. A name, a date, a phrase. The rain did not come. Further in more appear. Symbols scratched directly into the stone. A face with a cracked headdress. A snake curling into a knot. A handprint. Another. And another. You run your palm across them, matching your fingers to theirs. These were not grand inscriptions made for royal plazas. These were intimate, quiet, the graffiti of a people trying to hold on. One figure stands out, a scribe seated cross-legged, brush in hand. He's not smiling. He's not angry. He looks tired. There's a glyph beside him to remember. You keep walking. Deeper in the walls, widen into a chamber. Your steps echo now. A faint drip, steady and patient, marks the passage of time in cave speak. And then you see them. Codices, not the original paper books. Those are long gone, eaten by mold fire and Spanish priests with more enthusiasm than context. But images of codices etched into the stone, copied lovingly by hand. Perhaps by a single person who had no temple left to store them, no rulers left to read them, no apprentices left to pass them on. They copied anyway, glyph by glyph, line by line, rain cycles, Venus paths, sacrifice protocols, stories of gods, of twin heroes, of a world that once made sense. You crouch beside one panel and notice a shift halfway through. The glyphs change, less ornate, more rushed. The brushstrokes become scratches, and then they stop, mid-sentence. The wall beside it is blank. Historians still debate whether there were actual last scribes who documented the collapse. Some think these stories are symbolic, part myth, part memory. But here in this cave, you don't care, because someone did this. Someone came down here with a torch and a heart full of stories and decided I can't let it all vanish. You sit for a long time listening, and then just as you are about to turn back, you notice something new, a small bowl, tucked into a niche. Inside it, a few dried cacao beans, or what's left of them, an offering, not to the god, to the future, maybe to you. Here's your odd fact of the day. There's evidence that some post-collapse Maya communities, especially in the highlands, preserved fragments of ancient knowledge in oral form. Long poetic histories passed down through generations. Even today, some Maya languages still contain echoes of these stories, tucked away in lullabies and wedding songs. You stand slowly, bones creaking in the cave cold. Your hand brushes the last glyph on the wall. It's a simple one. It means end, but it's followed by a mark you almost miss, a dot. The Maya used dots to mean one, so maybe it wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something else. You leave the cave with the taste of wet stone in your mouth, your fingers smudged with the dust of memory. Behind you, the last stories rest in the dark, still whispering, still waiting. And the jungle outside, it didn't forget. It just went quiet. You walk back into the sunlight, blinking the cave's cool breath, still clinging to your skin like fog. The jungle seems louder now, like the trees are trying to distract you from what you just saw. A bird shrieks. A branch snaps in the distance. A lizard sprints across the path like it's late for a meeting. But you're not heading deeper into the Maya world anymore. You're heading forward into the years that came after. And for the first time on this journey, you see strangers. Not modern ones, not yet. These are conquistadors. You stumble into a clearing where the jungle has been hacked back, not by locals with machetes, but by men with helmets, beards, and a spectacular misunderstanding of everything around them. There's a rough wooden cross planted in the ground, a rusted sword, a burned outline where someone probably tried to camp, failed, and blamed a local storm god. And then you see the painting, well, what's left of it, a half-finished sketch on a temple wall, a figure in armor standing above bowed Maya figures. One of them is clearly Chaak, the rain god, labeled demon. Another, a king, is marked false idol. Someone tried to translate a language they couldn't read and got everything wrong with supreme confidence. This is where confusion arrived on horseback. The Spaniards didn't come during the height of Maya power. By the time they arrived in the 1500s, the great cities were already ghost towns, the jungle halfway through its reclamation plan. But people were still here. Communities, languages, customs, farmers still planting maize, women still weaving, priests still whispering the names of gods under their breath, even as they smiled at the friars. You step through what must have been a Spanish camp, the remains of a forge, a crumbled journal, a broken piece of armor. You pick it up too heavy, too hot from the sun. It smells like rust and regret. You can almost hear them. Burn the idols. Teach them the one true God. Make them forget. Spoiler alert, they didn't. The Maya didn't vanish. They adapted. They hid their gods beneath saints. They told their stories in new clothes. They survived. But the records, that's another story. You find a large stone platform near the back of the clearing. It's empty now, but once it was filled with books, codices, hundreds of them. Bark paper folded like accordions, painted by scribes who spent their whole lives mastering the glyphs. The Maya recorded everything. Births, rituals, astronomy, taxes, battles, dreams, and most of it burned, thanks to Spanish friars like Diego de Landa, who thought they were erasing lies and idolatry. He later regretted it and tried to reconstruct what he could. But the damage was done. Only 4 Maya codices survive today. 4 out of possibly thousands. Imagine burning the entire Library of Congress, then realizing 2 centuries later that you actually liked libraries. Historians still debate whether some codices might have been hidden, buried, protected. People still search, but nothing definitive has emerged. Just fragments and whispers. You sit beside the platform and stare at the stone. There's a scorch mark in the center, dark, permanent, like the stone remembers. Maybe it does. Here's your odd fact of the day. When some of the Spanish explorers first encountered the Maya and saw their calendars, they thought the people must have been visited by the devil because no heathen could possibly understand time so precisely. Their system was too good. That's what scared them. You walk a little farther past more colonial debris and find a final stele, tall, weathered, but still upright. This one wasn't carved by the Maya. It was carved by someone trying to imitate them. But the glyphs are wrong. The face is too round. The math is nonsense. Someone tried to record something important and failed miserably. You press your hand to it anyway. Because even failure is a kind of memory. The jungle around you buzzes louder now. A breeze kicks up, rattling the leaves. The birds call out again. You look back one last time, at the broken painting, at the burned platform, at the stubborn glyphs that won't go away. This is where the story fractured. Misread. Mistranslated. Mourned. But not forgotten, never truly forgotten. Because for all the mislabeling, the bonfires, and the awkward Latin annotations, the Maya didn't vanish. Their blood still runs in the people of Guatemala. Belize, Mexico, Honduras. Their languages are still spoken. Their corn still grows. Their gods still hide in the corners of kitchens and dreams. And the jungle, it's still telling the truth. You just have to know how to listen. You don't walk anymore. You wander, not lost. Just slower. Like your feet have figured out there's nowhere left to get to. The jungle has softened again. The vines part easily. The ground is firm. The sunlight isn't as sharp. It just lingers now, golden and drowsy like it's tired too. You find the last ruin by accident. There's no sign, no road. Just a mossy rise in the earth, shaped like the edge of memory. You brush aside a curtain of leaves and step into what used to be nothing famous. Not a temple, not a palace. Just a little home. Stone walls, shoulder high. A hearth in the corner. A circle of stones outside where someone used to cook. You sit there, because there's nowhere better to sit. And you listen. Nothing but the bugs, and the trees, and the story they're still whispering. This is where you start to wonder how much stayed. You've walked through cities. You've seen the temples, the murals, the scribes' last torch-lit etchings. But what about the parts no one wrote down? The songs sung while washing clothes. The jokes told between planting rows of maize. The stories whispered to children under a blanket of stars. Those things don't collapse. They fade. They shift. They get woven into the new world like threads you only see when the light hits just right. You lie back in the grass, your head resting against a stone. The sky above is deep blue, veined with treetops. The same sky the Maya watched. The same stars. Maybe even the same breeze, just older now. It hits you. You've spent this whole journey asking how they vanished. But they didn't. Not really. Collapse doesn't mean disappearance. It means change. A shifting of shape. A breaking of systems. A silence that still remembers the words. You close your eyes. You remember the codex in the cave. The broken ball court. The empty plaza. The rice bowl someone left behind. The calendar carved in haste. The whisper of a drought that never ended. The tooth in the dust. The mural scratched out. The mask in the floor. The handprints. The rain god. The dot. 1. The first step of counting again. Here's your last odd fact. Some Maya communities today still perform rituals at ancient sites. Lighting candles, burning copal, speaking in languages descended from the ones carved into stone. And when asked why they don't say because of history, they say because it's ours. You take a breath. The jungle exhales with you. The stone beneath you is warm. The leaves above flicker in lazy waves. You don't need to move. Not yet. Not for a while. Maybe ever. Because sometimes the best way to honor a story is just to listen.